We are live back here with another episode of the Big Break Podcast. Joining me here just today is Drew and Ethan. Corey had some other obligations he had to take care of this morning, but he should be back here. We had a wild week of Big Ten news. Starting with Jim Harbaugh facing a 4-game suspension, guys. 4-game suspension for buying a kid a McDouble and lying about it. Ironically, I guess so. I guess from like what during all this, he's telling the NCAA he doesn't know anything about buying a kid a cheeseburger, doesn't know anything about that. But at the same, during all this time, he's reporting to the NCAA that Ohio State is doing extra workouts or whatever with their players, and the NCAA is just like, so you don't remember buying a kid a cheeseburger, but you know all about Ohio State's practices? Okay. Okay.
I just think the NCAA it needs a reform. I mean, everybody up there, there's so much dumb stuff that we're picking on these guys for. I've got nothing
Absolutely.
against Jim Harbaugh, but you gotta stop picking on these guys, dude. Let them buy the kid let them buy 2 cheeseburgers. I don't care.
Oh,
There's all kinds of memes out there. I've seen cheeseburger buns full of cash. I
yeah.
mean, just
What
come
was
on.
it? Tua's younger brother, just came
Yeah, I
out and said
saw
he
that.
was
Yeah,
offered
dude.
$1.5 million to transfer to an unnamed SEC school.
I'm curious as to who it is.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna say it's the
Yeah,
obvious, but I'm really curious to
but
who it
yeah.
is.
but
I
like,
was gonna ask who you guys thought it was,
oh,
because
we
I'm
we'll get
obviously
into
it's
that here in
Bama, right?
we'll get into that because
Bama.
I have a couple things who I think it is outside of Alabama, but it's just like to your point though, Ethan. It's just like you have those things going on. You had Lincoln Riley reaching out to Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka weeks leading up to us playing in a playoff game, saying, "Hey, come out to USC next year.
God,
Come
that'd be
play,
wild.
come play for the
That
Heisman."
would be
Yeah,
so
it would,
awesome.
it would, but like that shit's going on, and you're picking on Harbaugh for and from my understanding, what it really was about, like this whole suspension, isn't the fact that he bought a kid a cheeseburger.
Right. So he lied about it.
Yeah, he was just like they came knocking and he lied.
Yeah. Did you do this?
No, no, but Ohio State, I don't recall buying a kid a cheeseburger, but Ohio State's doing illegal practices. What?
Yeah. I mean, it's not. It was. It's. It's not a big deal. I don't think
No,
that we all know that the NCAA is trash and has been trash at their rules for quite a while. So I don't think it's anything new or anything crazy. It could
it's
be a
definitely
lot
not.
worse. He could be Herm Edwards out at Arizona. Um,
Truth.
so it could be a lot worse. I mean, losing him for the first 4 games is kind of laughable
I mean,
because
4 high school teams.
those games are going to be laughable.
Absolutely.
So not a
Um,
big deal in the end, I don't think.
there is one game now that I would mark on my calendar during that stretch is that fourth game is Rutgers.
Yeah, but it's at home.
Don't count Greg Schiano. He got that.
That's fair.
Rutgers is looking
Yeah,
better than they have in the past, is what I'm
that's
saying.
true.
They're looking
And
more dangerous.
Noah Ventral's not
Yeah.
behind center anymore. So that
Yeah.
helps.
So
Yeah, and they'll be up for that game. That's like their Super Bowl, so
yeah, they're
Yeah,
gonna
they'll
be
be
up for
you
ready.
know
that
they're gonna
game.
bring it.
I saw
Exactly.
the OC's getting in trouble too with this. I think he's involved.
Sharon
Yeah.
Moore is facing a suspension as well.
So you
Um,
could have Mike Hart coaching this game.
that's man, that's who I said when I saw Sharon Moore is facing a possible suspension as well. Everybody was like, "Oh, Sharon Moore, he's going to be the next guy up, to take it over." And then it's reporting now that he may be involved in the suspensions, and I'm like,
Right.
"There's only one other guy I would, if I was them, one guy I would
Them.
go to would be
Yeah, Mike
Mike
Hart.
Hart,
Which,
without a
I mean,
doubt.
I'm biased
Yeah.
towards him anyway as a Colts fan and this and that. I mean, I love Mike Hart.
But he's a Michigan man.
Yeah,
He's
he's a great guy.
He's one of the greatest running backs in Michigan history. You know, he
Oh,
knows
yeah.
what's going
Mhm.
on. So I think I think Mike Hart would be a very good
I mean,
intern
technically,
for him.
he is the most prolific running back. He's the rushing leader by about 600 yards, 500 yards.
Like career or in a season?
Yeah, career.
Well, Blake
Mhm.
Corum or Donovan Edwards is going to collapse that this. Who's behind? Where's Blake Corum and
If
Donovan
there's
Edwards?
not a share,
Well,
I
where
mean,
does
I
I
don't
guess?
know.
Okay, so you're
Denard
looking.
was at 4,500. You got Corum had 1,400 last year. I don't know if they're still doing a timeshare back there. Even if you're
Yeah,
splitting 2,500 yards, you're not catching him.
true.
They're both
You're
going
not.
pro next year.
That's true. I thought Blake Corum.
Yeah, dude. Corum's only got 2,400 yards right now.
Oh yeah, he would need a
He's
2,000-yard
halfway.
season. Yeah, he would need a 2,000-yard season to even
He needed
think
2,600
sniff it.
yards.
Yeah, I was gonna say he would need like a 2,000-yard season to sniff Mike
To
Hart.
sniff Denard Robinson at
It
2.
too. Yeah. But I think with this whole thing is Harbaugh's just really getting in trouble because he lied about it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think
Don't
this is
lie.
it's like all, and I've, Michigan, the boards and all that, they're like, this is ridiculous, Urban didn't get suspended for whatever happened, and all that stuff. It's like, well, Harbaugh was repeatedly asked about it, and he lied about buying a kid a cheeseburger. Like, why are you lying about that? Yeah, I bought the kid a McDouble. So what? Sue me. It was $1.
I think they're more than that now.
Like 220.
220.
Yeah, I was
Oh
gonna say, they're
shit!
like 219 now.
Well, it wasn't a Big Mac.
Inflation.
Yeah,
My bad. Yeah, it wasn't
Wasn't
like
a
he.
$8 Big Mac.
Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
like he bought like a $30 Big Mac in New York City, but like, I mean, it's like, and I remember my neighbor, he coached for Ohio State. He would tell me all the time, like back in like 2010 and stuff, like the rules are so strict that like one of his players came up and said, "Yeah, coach, sorry, I didn't eat breakfast today, so I'm a little down. Like I didn't have money to eat breakfast." And it's like him as a coach couldn't go in and buy like this kid breakfast or go buy him groceries. It's like why is that even a thing? Like you're talking about kids like choosing between what like doing, paying maybe their electric bill because they live off campus and then buying groceries because they can't, you know what I mean? Like they just don't have the opportunity. Like, and obviously that's why they have NIL now, so these kids can make some money to go do stuff while they're in college. But it's like why does he? I guess my thing is
Well,
the NCAA.
yeah.
Why do you care if they're buying these kids food?
I mean, pick your battles, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's not like Harbaugh went out and bought this kid a $50,000 Rolex.
Not yet.
Well, not yet. But
Mm-hmm.
what do you guys think needs to be done? I mean, speaking just about this, and well, actually, before we get into that question, let's now move into the PJ FLECK saga that just came out. Apparently, players could, if they did certain things, you could earn tokens into a bank where you could get dismissed, like certain infractions, like a failed drug test. Maybe you did do something, you did something like failed a class, you could cash in your tokens and
Dude,
not get suspended
that
from the
got
team.
glossed over so fast.
Yeah.
They just went, didn't happen.
It was like nope,
PJ
didn't
FLECK
happen.
He came out right away, said that's not true. These are guys that weren't good enough, or lack of better words. Like they just were disgruntled ex-players that couldn't make the cut. And they're like, hey, this dude's an asshole. And he was like, no.
No,
Sorry.
But, yep.
Yeah, it seems like a hit piece. I mean, the all of Minnesota University already came out and backed PJ FLECK, so that's a good sign. PJ FLECK talked about it in media days
extensively.
Yeah, like the whole the bank, the FLECK bank or whatever
It
you
was a
call it.
metaphor.
Yeah, it's an analogy or whatever. Yeah, I mean, we all know PJ Fleck's a little different, isn't he? They use the word cult. I would argue that most football programs are cultish. Not that it's a bad thing.
It's just a fact.
Yeah, I got Josh Pate said this quote from Brady Quinn. Brady Quinn said that football is an inside out sport sometimes. Everybody wants to know the insides, but
I saw that.
the people who have never been on the inside, uh maybe us perhaps who have never been in the locker room, once you see inside the locker room, you're a little taken back, you're a little shook by it because you don't know uh the ins and outs of what's going on
Yeah,
inside.
Absolutely.
it's the old fashioned don't meet your hero.
I was
Exactly.
my cousin was the quarterback at senior high for during like the early 2000s, and I was like ball boy for him, and his dad was on the coaching staff, my like, godfather or uncle. So it was like I was like immersed in that as like a young age, like 10, 11, 12. And I'll tell you what, you guys are like Brady Quinn's absolutely right. Like even just a high school locker room from what I remember back there, I was taken back about like, what actually went on there, and it's definitely a different
Right.
atmosphere, you know?
And that's even before
For
the PG era and
Yeah.
social media and
Oh,
stuff like that.
I mean, you guys will get this. We have this local high school, Ashland. Their mascot's the arrow. I'll never forget this. This coach walked in with an arrow, stuck it right into the wall, and said, "That bitch better be fucking broken when I get back into this locker room at halftime." And it was just like, you know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't think it's just like little stuff like that, and it's like, and it's like you do in this PG era where kids maybe aren't used to that type of stuff, and it's just like they get, oh, this coach was throwing arrows at us, and it's like PJ Fleck shooting arrows at his kids in the middle of the locker room. It's like that's not what happened.
Yep.
Yeah, homie cocked back and said,
Yeah.
"Slap."
Right.
Completely out of context.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
And I like what PJ Fleck said. He goes, the PJ Fleck Bank was a metaphor to buy into the program. Are you going to put your money in my bank and buy into what we're doing?
Mm-hmm. And if dudes were passing the conditioning tests, then they wouldn't have to wake up early the next day and do it again.
Yeah.
So like if you put in the work, you won't be punished.
Well, it's
And
I'll use this
not like punished,
for
but
when.
like you
So
won't
it's
have to
like,
run extra,
yeah, it was like
like any coach has ever said.
Well, it's like I ran across country, right? And it's like our coach knew, like, if I didn't run my mile that day hard, he goes, "You're doing 2 extra because you didn't run that one as hard as you should have."
Mhm.
Ass.
Ass, right? But I mean, like, at a
Yeah.
point though, that's your job.
Yeah,
You
that's
know what I
coaching.
mean? And that's
That's
coaching,
what you're there for.
right? You
100%.
and to me, I think it's just those weak-minded era that kids are growing up in, where they never had somebody sit there and literally cuss them out.
Well, when the internet's parenting you, I mean,
Yeah.
that's not a conversation for this.
Right, absolutely. But I'm glad. One thing I am glad with PJ Fleck is Minnesota stayed by him.
Mhm.
Minnesota came out and was like, "Nah, not here. Trust us,
Yeah.
that's not happening." And
Mhm.
PJ
Came
Fleck
out
right away.
They didn't
Yeah.
allow it to fester. They didn't allow anybody to take it and run with it. They just said, "We're right now. This is where we're at."
Yeah, which is great because everyone's just going to automatically assume, oh, another Northwestern.
Yep.
That's exactly what I thought when I first heard it.
When I saw it, I was like,
no.
"Oh,
Yeah.
jeez." And I was like, PJ Fleck is rowing right out of there. Just right out of there. He's taking his boat and rowing.
Our programs
over the
are just
waterfall.
falling apart, dude.
Yeah, I was like,
The Big Ten's falling apart.
Well, then it was like, because it was like, we just got out of Pat Fitz's saga with Northwestern. Harbaugh gets announced that he's
Mhm.
negotiating how many games he's going to be suspended for. And then it was like 24 hours later, PJ Fleck is in here accused of getting tokens handed in for failed drug tests so you aren't suspended. It's like, what are we doing in the Big Ten with our coaches? Like,
Yeah. But
Golly.
now it doesn't seem as bad though.
no,
Right.
it
Like
does not.
the Harbaugh suspension, as we talked about, is just silly. Shouldn't be lying. So whatever. And then
Yeah.
the
And,
Minnesota piece just doesn't feel right.
and like with the Harbaugh thing, it's like I get it. Like I get like the NCAA, like, yo, you lied to us about buying
Mhm.
a kid a cheeseburger, but you knew all what was going on in every other program. Like bullshit.
Hmm.
Like, and I heard a wise man say one time, the NCAA is like the FBI. When they come knocking at your door, they don't ask you questions. When they're asking you a question, they're giving you the opportunity to tell them the truth right then and
Yeah.
there before they fuck you.
They know the answer.
Yeah, they already know the answer. They're just giving you the opportunity to say yes, essentially.
Hmm.
You know? And it's like when that happens, like just tell them the truth. Or you say cheeseburger, I no, what? You know? Like you just act like you or something like that, but like you just have to tell them the truth. And then you wouldn't be suspended for 4 games.
None of those games are going to matter.
And none of them are probably going to matter. What did they open up with? Like, I know they play Bowling Green.
Week 1, East Carolina.
Yeah.
Too bad they're not playing the East Carolina team from last year. Week
Yeah.
2, UNLV. Week 3, BG. Week 4, Rutgers. All home games.
Our local Paul Feinbaum just put into the chat, guys. Not trying to get Ethan all excited at 11 a.m. here, but the burger Harbaugh purchased the boys was called the Brian Greasy's own line double burger, retail value of per burger $19 at the Brown Jug.
Ooh, that's a pricey burger.
Better be good. I'd like to try that. We have to try that sometime. I'm all
um,
about that.
well, this Harbaugh suspension, because coming right out of like the suspension, I think they play their fifth game would be Michigan State, if I'm not mistaken, right?
They get at
You are
Nebraska.
At Nebraska.
at Nebraska.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay.
They go back to back road games after
Back
game
to,
4.
yeah. Okay.
Nebraska, Minnesota.
Okay. Yep, and then they play Michigan State later in the year. Never mind.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
so you see it in the background. Let's get to it. Drew, you said it before the show, so I want to give you the floor here. You said during the Big Ten Media Day press conference, Mel Tucker sold you on 2023 Spartan football.
He did. He at least sold me on a few more wins than I was thinking. I originally was just thinking, oh, this is going to be a bad year, man.
Yeah.
Um, but after doing a little more research, listening to Mel talk, uh, seems like he's got it kind of going the right direction.
Okay.
I don't know if the talent is there this year, but it should be pretty interesting. The quarterback competition is probably the biggest thing for me. Is it Noah Kim or is it Caden Hauser? I
Uh-huh.
learned that Noah Kim went
Okay.
41-2 as a quarterback in high school in the state of Virginia.
They play AAA ball there.
They damn well do. But then he broke his leg junior year. So that kind of scared off a few schools. So he ended up only getting 2 scholarship offers from Power 5 schools. He was
Okay.
originally committed to Virginia Tech, decommitted, and signed with Sparty when Tucker came over, I believe.
Okay.
So this Noah Kim could be pretty decent. We'll see. I like the running back room. I think Jalen Berger's a very nice running back transfer from Wisconsin. I like the 2 transfers that came in, Nathan Carter from UConn, as well as Jaron Magnum from South Florida. My concerns on offense are the playmakers, the receivers. I mean, Trey Mosley's coming back. He's probably going to be the number one. They bring in uh, what's his name? Uh,
The Nebraska kid.
I think I'm thinking about Wisconsin. Alante Brown
Oh,
from Nebraska. Yeah, no,
yeah,
I'm
that's the
thinking
one I
about
saw.
uh I'm thinking about Wisconsin. I'll get to it later. Um
No.
yeah, so on the offensive line looks good. The running backs look pretty good. The quarterback is a question mark. The playmakers, the receivers are a question mark. So I don't think this offense is going to be that great. The defense, I think might take a step back. It doesn't sound like the secondary is going to be very good. A lot of question marks back there. The linebacker group is excellent. Jacoby Wyndham and Cal Holiday are studs. They are names that you'll know by the end of the season. Um, yeah, so I guess I'm just a little bit higher on this team post media days. Um, but I still think it's a mediocre team in the end.
What?
Yeah,
Where do you think? Ethan, go ahead, and then I'll ask this question.
you can go ahead. I can wait.
Okay. Where do you? What do you think is? What do you think Mel Tucker is doing wrong in East Lansing that his predecessor wasn't doing?
I think it starts with the fact that Mel Tucker was a DB's coach. He is known to be a defensive back, a secondary coach. He coached DBs at Alabama.
Okay.
Um, and so I just think that I don't understand why the secondary has been so terrible for so many years. Um, so that's my biggest what's going on there, Mel.
Ethan?
Yeah, I think he's more on the defensive side, and I kind of question his recruiting. Um, but at the same time, I almost feel like he's more of just a salesman. Like he's all pitch, and I'm not 100% confident in his straight up coaching abilities, offensive or defensive. I get that's why you have a whole cast and crew around you, but I, I think after that 11-2 season, the $90 million contract, I think he's just kind of more of a salesman to me than he is full on coach. But I could be wrong. I didn't listen to any of the Big Ten Media Day stuff.
Um,
He's a pretty good salesman, I'll tell you that.
yeah, he's definitely a good salesman. Um, where I think he's going wrong, where I think is wrong with it is I've always said this, and I'll stand by this comment. Some people are better off as position coaches. Some people are great coordinators, and some guys are just hell of good head coaches, right? Um, example, Kerry Combs. He put 4, 5, 6, I think, corners and safeties into the first round as a DB safety coach, right? When he was at Ohio State. Went to be a coordinator, wasn't that good as a coordinator. Brent Venables, phenomenal defensive coordinator. Brent Venables is a phenomenal defensive coordinator. His first year at Oklahoma, I mean, even though that was a roster that was depleted by Lincoln Riley taking a bunch of people, wasn't a didn't look like he was a very good head coach. Didn't look like he got a program ready to play football, right? So
Yeah, but I think that's hard in a year one thing.
you're
I
not
think by year
wrong.
4 and 5, you're getting your guys and what you believe is the proper path.
You're not
You
wrong.
walk me into any program year one. These kids don't know me. They don't care who I am. The ones that stuck around are either just loyal to the program or think I've got a promising outcome ready for them.
Yeah, but Brent Venables holds some clout in the college football world, especially with the defenses and the defensive players he put into the NFL.
They don't play defense in the Big 12,
I,
soon to be SEC.
I
Well, defense they play in the SEC, but
but
that's a Big 12 school.
so I get it. I get it. But what I'm saying though is sometimes you're better off. Like sometimes coaches are better off being coordinators. Some are better off as your position
Right.
coaches, and then you have your Nick Sabans, your Urban Meyers, your um, Dabo Sweeney type guys. Ryan Day's, Jim Harbaugh's of the world that are just good head coaches. They can they have a good vision of how to run a program instead of just running a unit. And I think
Yeah.
Mhm.
that's what Mel Tucker's most identifiable problem is he hasn't figured out how to make that transition from a position coach or slash coordinator to being that guy to runs the program, because when you're running the program you have to have your hands in every single aspect of that game, and you can't give your full attention 100%. You know what I mean? You're dividing up your attention 33% essentially through special teams, offense, and defense. You
I
know,
get that.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
me
You
I
and
mean,
it,
it also kind of depends on what coaching tree you've been aligned with your
true,
career, too. I
you're not
mean,
wrong.
he's been in Colorado, Georgia, Alabama. He was DC for the Bears. He was with the Jaguars and the Browns.
He's coached under. He's been under Nick Saban, so you had to learn how he does things.
so
That was only
he's
1 year. And he was, what, an associate head coach and a DB's coach?
Wouldn't care. You
Uh,
still saw how Saban ran that program. And 1 year you still saw, and I guarantee you that year he was there, Saban hasn't changed shit since.
it's
I
been
hope
eight
he's changed
years.
since.
Yeah, Saban's
You
got to
got
keep up
to.
with the times.
Yeah.
I'm saying when you boil it down to the way they do
The core
things,
of it.
the core of
Yeah.
it,
Fair.
Saban hasn't changed from the time he won his first title at Alabama to today. The core of what he does is the same, and they do it
It
the
does
same
not.
way.
Yeah, doesn't
Um
change.
I'm wondering if like I kind of agree that Mel Tucker maybe isn't a head coach. Like there's so much that falls under the head coach umbrella,
That's all I'm
and
saying.
that
Maybe he's not a head coach.
yeah, and that includes hiring your coaching staff. So he's had Jay Johnson and Scotty Hazelton as the OC and DC since he's been here.
Mhm.
And I mean, we've all seen it. The offense is a roller coaster. The defense has not been good. So
Exactly.
it's crazy that he's brought these dudes back for their fourth year. I understand like keeping chemistry and keeping shit together,
Yeah.
but by this point, I would at least be entertaining a new offensive coordinator and a new
Eh,
defense coordinator.
Or or yeah, you could do both, but like being a defensive guy, he could just say, "Okay, let me go get an offensive coordinator like Ryan Day said, who can be a head coach of the offense. So I can
Mm-hmm.
dive into fixing this defense." Right? Where Ryan Day
And
was
Yeah,
I
like, "I need a head coach for the defense so I can just dive into my offense." Right?
yeah.
and I'm not sure. And I know the offense is hateful. They only failed to score 20 points 4 times last year. Um,
That's I mean,
but I think that there is a mix of offense and defense that needs addressed by the coaching staff. And
absolutely.
if he's going to see out longer in this, seek out longer than this contract or longer than this year in this contract per se, he's going to need to start looking at the open market next year.
I
Yeah, I think this is a huge year for his coaching staff. Not
Yeah.
just him, but his coaching staff.
I think Michigan State is a patient program. And they went who was there? D'Antonio. They went through a
Yeah.
lot of down years with him, and they stuck by him through them because they knew they were going to get some good years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So they're one of those programs that are going to be patient. But and to Drew's point, I think that's what is going to happen. They're going to put pressure not on Mel Tucker's job, but on Mel Tucker to fire the coordinators and bring new guys in.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I have in my notes. But I have Mel Tucker's on the hot seat. But I also kind of put
Okay.
where do you go and when do you cut ties? Like, if you do cut ties, I mean,
When do you do it?
is it going to be after getting thumped by Michigan in October? Is it going to be losing to that random team? Like, is it going to be if you lose at Rutgers? Is it going to be if you lose at Indiana? I think if you lose at Indiana, week 11 or 12,
You know what I think you do? I
I
think
mean, I'd be pretty upset about that.
I think if you have a bad start to the season, right? Um, which they shouldn't. I mean, they should probably start 2-1 or 3-0, depending on how good
They
Washington is.
very
Um,
good,
they're gonna
very good.
they're gonna run into trouble with Maryland. They're probably gonna run into trouble with Iowa. They'll probably beat Rutgers, but here's
I
my
don't
here's
know.
my scenario for you, okay? If I was Michigan State and you're moving on from Mel Tucker, like Ethan has him in the hot seat and you're going to move on from him, I think you do it privately and you tell Mel you're going to finish out the year and you start interviewing candidates throughout the year. And you get that guy in waiting. So the last game of the season, Mel's done. You announce the new hire. You make a big splash, at the very end of the season for the program because you're probably not going to be in a bowl game, and that gives you a little momentum going into recruiting season, and that gives at least this guy time to get in, get his staff, and hit some of these recruiting trails to maybe try to flip some guys.
Yeah, because this roster's a big mix of sophomores and seniors. I mean, you've got a lot of guys that could leave this year and a lot of guys that are going to be back next year. You kind of got a 50-50 roster turnover going into next year.
Yeah.
Um, the biggest thing for me is you lost your number one receiver.
Yep.
That's pretty huge. I don't care. I mean, I know Noah Kim or Caton Hauser's coming in, but Keon Coleman was a huge loss. And now, I mean, yeah, he's getting balls thrown to him by Jordan Travis, who's a potential Heisman candidate, but that's huge. Peyton Thorne went to Auburn. That's not a huge loss, but it was leadership. It was a guy that knew the system. And he left to be the two guy behind Robbie Ashford, who's a huge dual threat guy.
Which is
And
crazy that you left.
significantly younger. Yeah.
You left a 4-8 team to go to a 4-8 team,
Um,
only to sit
I'm
behind a guy.
I do think the defense is going to take a couple strides forward this year. I don't know if it's considered a huge, huge add, but I like the transfer of Terry Roberts coming in from Iowa. Um, 13 tackles, a couple pass breakups, and a pick last year. It's not a five-star caliber ad, but he's definitely going to get play time. He's going to have a chance to make a difference. He'll add depth. You've got Cal Holiday coming back, 120 tackles last year, huge, huge defensive leader. And you bring your second leading tackler after that is Angelo Gross, who's a local kid here. 53 tackles, only played 8 games, had 4 passes defense.
Well, there's a
So,
reason he only played those games.
yeah, it's true. I mean,
There's a reason he only played those
I have my
games.
opinions on all that, but
Oh,
and I don't think
the big fight in the tunnel.
I think that really derailed some of Mel Tucker's momentum at the end of the season. But they did win their next 2 games, and I don't know. That is a weird way to go about that. I'm not a big fan of how that all went down, just as a sports fan in general, especially when it happened back to back weeks for Illinois and Michigan State. Um, but
Oh, at the fights in the tunnel at the big house.
yeah,
Yeah.
the scuffles. But the one thing I did find
Which
interesting that
is
isn't a huge in and out. I did see that they 20 players transferred out, including 4 pending, and there's 19 in. So not only did he have however many players leave due to graduation, but you lost 20 more guys and had to bring 19 new faces in.
It's gonna be
I saw
tough
that one of
for him.
their long snappers transferred in January and out to FSU at the end of June, about a month ago.
How
So
is that
he went
legal?
right. He came in January and went right back out in June.
How is that
I
allowed?
don't know. I don't know the rules, man. I just saw it all. I found that interesting because I was looking at their transfer list and I go, "Well, that guy's name.
Is both
That's
places.
I've seen that on both sides." So then I checked the dates, and it's a long snapper from Ohio State. So
Oh, that guy, yeah. He wasn't gonna play anyways.
they actually got the long snapper and one of the kickers. They got O'Shaughnessy from Ohio State
Oh
as a
yeah, he
punter.
wasn't gonna play
So
either. Um,
just found
so
that
when you're looking
interesting.
at the schedule here, for Sparty here, they start with four straight home games. They go Central Michigan, Richmond, Spiders, Rich who? R-
Richmond,
there we
Coach
go.
Carter, dude.
Right.
Love it.
Washington. Then they host Maryland. Then they have two straight road games: Iowa, Rutgers, November 21st or October 21st. They host um, Michigan, at Minnesota, home against Nebraska, at Ohio State, at Indiana, and then home against Penn State to end the season, which looks like to be announced 7:30 NBC game.
Well, the Penn State game's also being played in Detroit on a Friday night.
Oh, okay. So that'll be a neutral site home game for them. Um,
Yeah.
when you're looking at their schedule, guys, what do you think their ceiling is, their floor, and what do you have them at? Before you guys go, Corey says Michigan State will go 4-8.
It's fair.
Um, all right, I'll start. Well, Phil Steele has this as the number three hardest schedule in America. So that's not good. I think the first two are easy wins. Central's not that good. Richmond was paid to lose. I think Washington comes in, and I don't see any way that Michigan State can stop the Washington offense. So I think that's a loss. They host Maryland, who's coming off a long week. They play on Friday the week before, so that extra day of rest for them. I'm going to take Maryland there. Uh, at Iowa is a tough call, but I think I'm going to take Iowa in that. I have them beating Rutgers, losing to Michigan, a pair of toss-up games between Minnesota and Nebraska. I think they win one of those. A loss at Ohio State, a win against Indiana, and then I have them losing to Penn State, but I also think that that's a trap game for Penn State. Sparty will have nothing to lose, so they're going to go balls to the wall at Ford Field. So my ceiling for Michigan State is actually 6-6. My floor is 3-9. I have them going 5-7.
Alrighty, Ethan.
Yeah, I initially looked at this and saw 5-7 again, but I went over it a few times this morning. I marked down 3 wins, 4 question marks, and 5 losses. I do think this is going to be a very inconsistent season. It's going to be very up and down and roller coastery. So it just depends on how bad each week they're getting beat. Um, but I do feel like they're going to go 2-0, and Washington's going to come to town and lay a 40 ball on them. And I don't think it's going to look like a very fair fight. That
Yeah,
being said, I think a lot of the coin flip games could possibly go their way. I've got them at a ceiling of 7-5. Um, Definitely Rutgers, Nebraska, Minnesota, Maryland could all go either way. Um, if the Penn State game I do see as a trap game, Penn State's going to be walking into that game either 9-2 or 10-1, and I think they're either going to be looking ahead or falling asleep at the wheel. So I agree with Michigan State having nothing to lose. It could be a problem, but My ceiling's 7-5. My floor is also 3-9, and I said 4-8 is my final prediction.
4-8. Okay. 4-8. Um, I'm gonna go with I'm going with Drew here. At 5-7. When I was looking up and down the roster, or not the roster, the schedule, it was just like, two easy wins back to back, or back to back. Washington's gonna come in there and whomp them. I think Maryland. I think after getting whomped by Washington, Maryland comes in, and with how not good the secondary is looking, I think the Tagovailoa there is gonna absolutely go air raid and make Mike Leach very proud. And he's going to destroy that defense, just pick them apart. Iowa, Rutgers, Iowa's defense, and then Rutgers, Michigan, and then Minnesota, Nebraska. Tough games, but I expect Minnesota and Nebraska both to win those. I expect them to lose against Ohio State, but in Indiana and then Penn State's that trap. But I'm going to go with, like Drew said, 5-7. I think that's where a one game improvement from last year is good. Um, I just don't think they're going to get to that magic number of 6 this year. When you look at their schedule. Now if they
Mhm.
beat
Yeah.
Now if they can rebound after that bad loss to Washington and rebound well again and get a win against Maryland, they could find themselves in a bowl game.
The problem for
Yeah.
me is you draw four of the toughest teams and I know they have the third toughest schedule, but you draw four of the best teams in the conference, and you're
Yeah.
going to you're splitting them 2-2 road and home technically, but that Penn State game is going to be 50-50, if not more white than green. So that's
Oh,
like two and
probably.
a half road games,
Yeah.
and that's rough. That's a long season. I mean, I know you have to take it 1 week at a time, but you're basically all but circling 4 L's to start the year, and that finding 6 out of 8 wins after that's going to be real tough to find a bowl game,
Yeah.
Mm.
especially with Washington basically another L.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
The
So
draw
you
from the
got to,
West is really tough with
yeah. I
road
mean,
Iowa and road Minnesota.
if you
Yeah.
trip up both of those, that's huge. But at the same time, no, that's
Yeah.
yeah, it's rough.
Well, let's keep it rolling here. Let's keep it rolling. Um, we got a new face in Wisconsin, as we've talked about, many of times. He said at Big Ten Media Day he was happy to be back in the Big Ten. Coach Luke Fickell starts his first year as a Wisconsin head coach, second year as a head coach of a Big Ten program. Because he did do the interim 2011 season as a head coach for Ohio State. He said he was happy to be back in the Big Ten. Said the thought of being in the Big Ten, knowing he'd be coaching back in the Big Ten, was a big piece of him leaving Cincinnati. Even though Cincinnati was moving on to the Big 12. Um, I like it. I like this hire from Wisconsin. I like what he's done up front with bringing, some good talent in through the transfer portal. Um, you know what you're going to get from him. You're going to get a good defense, solid defense, which Wisconsin has always had. And I think another thing he's going to do what he knows works in the Big Ten: run the football to open up the play action pass.
Yeah, um, yeah. There's definitely so much promise in Madison this year. FanDuel has them at 8.5 wins. I was looking at some of that stuff today. You got a whole new coaching regime. You bring in Luke Fickell, 64-25, 3-3 in bowls, 0-2 New Year's Six bowl games. Phil Longo, the OC from North Carolina, he coached Sam Howell. They had multiple 1,000-yard guys underneath him previously. Before that, was at Ole Miss, and they averaged 500 yards a game on offense, but they had red zone scoring issues. On the defensive side, you bring in Mike Tressel, and he was at Cincinnati with Fickle, and then prior to that was at Sparty for 13 years in various roles, and is Jim Tressel's nephew, the ex-Ohio
Yep.
State coach. But the thing for Mike Tressel is he gets his three top tacklers back on defense, especially the highlight of Mema Nyong'Menta. Nyong'Menta? I don't know how to pronounce that, but we're going to go with it. So that's going to be huge. The defense is always stout in Madison. The crowd is huge. Um, your quarterback, Graham Mertz, he transferred to Florida. Not a big loss because you just
Thank
brought in
God.
Tanner. Yeah, you just brought in Tanner Mordecai, which the Wisconsin fans, everybody just, we have a guy that can throw the ball. We're going to
Yeah.
enter an air raid offense. He just threw for 3,500 yards, 33 and 10 on 65% last year completion. You bring in Nick Evers from OU to back him up. He was a highly touted prospect at one point, hasn't seen any playtime yet. You're bringing back 10 offensive starters, 8 defensive starters. You're bringing in another receiver in Bryson Green, and CJ Williams transferred in from USC, who's a banger of a sophomore receiver. You also brought in 2 Cincinnati wide receivers and 2 Cincinnati O linemen to help Fickle and his familiarity and help these guys as senior leaders. One thing I did find interesting going through all the Wisconsin stuff, they've only lost one bowl game in 10 years. The 2019 Rose Bowl was a 1 point loss to Oregon. That was Paul Christ's only bowl loss. And the last bowl loss before that was a 13 Capital One Bowl to South Carolina.
Wow.
Really?
So that there's some pretty big shoes to fill in Madison, but I think that he's going to get a bowl game out of this team minimum, so we can keep that streak going again. But yeah, I think that looking at the notes that I've taken and just all the stuff I read this weekend studying up for this, I've bought into the Wisconsin a little bit this year. They've definitely surprised me in what they've done and what they're capable of.
Yeah, dude. Fickle is taking over a hell of a team. Like this might be the best like first year or new head coach taking over the program. This might be like the best program that was available. The offense looks insane. Braylon Allen is going to be a Heisman Trophy contender. I think this offense is going to open up so much for the run game between Allen and Ches Malusi. Like, I don't think this offense skips a beat. I think they improved last year. They averaged 26 points a game. Phil Longo at North Carolina never averaged below 33 points a game. So this offense is going to
Wow.
score.
Well,
Tressel, what is it, Mike?
yes.
I think Mike Tressel is a phenomenal defensive coordinator. I love this coaching staff that Fickle put together. I think this team's going to be awesome this year. The schedule works out well for them. My only concern is the defensive line. They lose quite a few pieces, but they also bring in a few good pieces. Darian Varner was first team American last year. He was from Temple. So he should be pretty nice, but I think the defensive line takes a step back, but I think the rest of the defense is fine. So overall, like I said, this team's going to be awesome. It depends, of course, on how well they gel, how well they build chemistry and fit into the systems.
Yeah, that was one question that I was just thinking of is there enough ball to go around for Mordecai and Braylon Allen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the transfer wide receiver that I was thinking about for Sparty was actually here for Wisconsin was Bryson Green. You mentioned him. He was the number 2 receiver at Oklahoma State last year. I think that's a really good pickup. I think CJ Williams is a very good pickup. Um,
Yeah, Will Pauling brought in from Cincy. He's probably going to be a
mhm.
starter.
Skylar Bell as well is returning, and Kymir Dyke or DK is the leading returning receiver. He is also good. I mean, they
So,
got plenty of playmakers,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
and they have your typical Wisconsin offensive line.
Now, how do
Hoss.
you
So yeah,
think
they're gonna win.
we've seen a lot of like some of these guys like transfer in that like from like the Big 12, Pac-12 schools or ACC schools or like the FB or like your group of 5. Maybe not they haven't produced very well. Um do you guys think there's going to be a like especially for Tanner Mordecai coming from SMU? Do you think there is going to be a huge a, like or do you think there's going to be an adjustment period for him? Not a huge adjustment, but just an adjustment period from playing that caliber of football that he's used to playing and seeing versus what you're going to see week in and week out playing a Big Ten schedule.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm,
I imagine there'll be an adjustment period uh, for a moment. Mordecai, maybe not too much. He was originally at Oklahoma, so he's played Power Five before. And SMU is like high end G5. So, um, yeah, there will be an adjustment, but luckily the schedule allows the
That
adjustments to happen during mediocre teams. So, yeah.
yeah. I mean, Mordecai's played Cincinnati. He's played Maryland. He's played, just looking at the schedule here, TCU. I mean, he's dabbled in bigger programs. It's not like he's seen a million of them, but I think
well,
that he's at least gotten the picture of what it's going to be like.
absolutely. I was just saying because like when I think of Big Ten football, I think of the physicality that we play with in the Big Ten, you know, and like the toughness that comes with being in the Big Ten. Um, and I've seen like just, like a lot of players, like unless you came from like, Oklahoma or like a big program, like a big Power Five program, there was a long adjustment period to how physical you have to be in the Big Ten. And I mean, and I'm talking across the board. You have to be physical. Like you have to be a physical running back. You have to be a physical quarterback. You have to be a physical. Your defense and offensive linemen are physical. Your linebackers have to be willing to get into those trenches and go up against a 350-pound offensive lineman and knock him on his ass. You know,
The
like if you're a
good news
corner,
is he's got that.
yeah. And I'm saying like, and if you're a corner, like you got to be able to get physical with Marvis Harrison Jr., not be scared to jam him at the line. You know what I'm saying? Like, um,
I don't think they're going to have any issues with
I don't think they're gonna have
that.
issues with that, but I just wonder like and I was looking at Wisconsin's schedule. The only There's 2 tough games before they get to Ohio State, and they're 2 games right before they play them. Iowa, Illinois, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
those 2 games are where you're going to see how physical this Wisconsin team is and
Uh,
how
Yeah.
the adjustment going from some of these smaller schools that these guys played in into Big Ten football is going to play.
I mean, Wisconsin, it says, is 11-2 straight up
Yeah.
since 2008 against Illinois. So, I mean, they've kind of got their number, but anything's possible this year.
I mean,
I think there are a good few trap games on this schedule. I don't think that this schedule is as easy as it looks, but the possibilities are endless.
oh, Greg Bielema has Iowa or Illinois looking great. Iowa's just going to have a stout defense and they're going to play physical. So it's just how and I guess what I'm saying like in that game especially against Iowa, when Tanner Mordecai gets hit by that 350, that 280-pound or that 290-pound lineman, that literally just sandwiches him. How is
Yeah.
he going to react?
I mean, they make those in other conferences too, but I get your point.
They make him, but I don't know. Like to me, that's just like then it's not only it's not, I guess, like in other conferences, yeah, they may have one or two guys, but that's Iowa's entire defensive line.
Right.
I
Yeah, I
think
get
I'd be
that.
willing to bet that this is the best offensive line Tanner Mordecai has
Guys,
ever stood behind.
oh,
And I
100%.
also believe that Iowa game
100,000%.
wins the West early on in the
Yes,
year.
Yeah,
I do
I
too.
got that one circled.
I think,
Yeah, that's it
And,
says go ahead.
and they draw it at home. Good for
yep.
them.
Well, and
It
I was going to
says the
say,
home team is 5-1 straight up, including 4 straight wins in this series.
ooh, well,
I
that
do love
bodes well for Wisconsin.
all my stuff's courtesy of Phil Steele. I guess I should probably notate that at some point.
They're, and I was going to say, when I look at their schedule, their two toughest games, they luckily draw at home. Iowa and Ohio State. They get them both in Camp Randall, sitting right behind us.
Which is fantastic. That's
Mm-hmm.
huge for them. Huge confidence booster for Fickle. He's not going to be intimidated at all when Ohio State walks through that door.
Uh, and to be
Yeah.
honest, I don't think Luke Fickell would be intimidated walking into the shoe as a first-year head coach either.
No,
No,
just like
Yeah.
I don't think Marcus Freeman was either or will be.
Marcus Freeman
I
wasn't,
agree.
and part of that is, I mean, Luke Fickell played in the shoe, coached there for a decade, and it's like you can't be scared when you're walking in there when you've been in that atmosphere hundreds of times.
Yeah.
Plus, I think back to how we were talking about how Mel Tucker may not be a head coach. I think Luke Fickell is 100% a head coach.
This okay, and
Oh, yeah.
he's a good example to like as you're saying of a coordinator who is a good head coach.
Yeah, I think he's going to be just fine.
Oh yeah, I love the program that he built at Cincinnati. The culture was awesome. Everybody was bought in. I imagine he's just going to do the same here.
And the one thing he did at Cincinnati, that they never had in that Bearcat program before, they beat the teams that they were supposed to beat, and they lost to the teams they were supposed to lose to. When he was there,
They should have beat Georgia, but yeah.
they should have, could have, would have, but didn't. But
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, they beat the teams they were supposed to beat. They lost to the teams who you expected them to lose to. What?
They were probably not going to beat. Yep.
Yep. And I think when you're looking at Wisconsin, I think you're going to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat, and you're going to be even more competitive in the games that they think that you shouldn't be.
You're going to be dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. Corey has. Let me get back to it here. I'm sorry. Corey has Wisconsin sitting at 9-3 this year. What are your guys' ceiling floor here for them?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Back to Phil. Phil Steele has Wisconsin as his number one surprise team in the nation. His main power ratings has them at 11-1, which when you look at the schedule, you can kind of see they have the 59th most difficult schedule in the nation, which is good for them. I think the first 3 games are dubs. At Washington State is a little tricky. Pullman can be a difficult place to play, but they're still just a mediocre team. And week 2, I can't trust them to pull an upset. The at Purdue game, both teams are going to be off short weeks, so only 6 days rest. I'm going to lean towards Wisconsin just because of the talent gap. I think Rutgers is a win. I agree. I think that October 14th, that Iowa game is probably going to determine the West. Luckily, they draw that at home, so I'm going to take Wisconsin. However, the next week at Illinois, that game is in between Iowa and Ohio State. I think that's the trap game. It's Illinois' homecoming weekend. So I'm actually going to take Illinois during that week, and then I'll take Ohio State over Wisconsin the next week. But then I have them winning out with toss-up game at the end of the season at Minnesota. It's a rivalry game. Minnesota's going to be pretty legit. Um, really could go either way. So my ceiling would be 10-2, and my floor would be probably 8-4.
Okay.
So I'm gonna split the difference and go 9-3.
Solid, solid.
Like it.
Ethan?
Yeah. Looking at the schedule, you draw Buffalo first, win at Washington State. Like Drew said, a little tricky out in Pullman. Should be a win. Just looking at, I mean, courtesy of Phil Steele, anything going forward here. Georgia Southern win at Purdue on a Friday night could be fun, but they've won 16 straight against Purdue, according to Phil Steele. So I don't feel like that's going to be much of an issue. Get a week off, grab Rutgers for homecoming. Badgers have won 4-0. I mean, they're 4-0 against Rutgers all time. Win. Getting Iowa at home is huge, and it's going to be huge. You're going to end up potentially moving 6-0, and you're going to be ranked in the high teens at this point, most likely. Um, Home team's 5-1 with 4 straight wins in this series. I definitely seeing it being tricky. I think this will be obviously the first true test, like most of us do, in a fantastic game that'll probably decide the West. Um, that is one of my question mark games at Illinois. I agree with everything Drew said. You're looking at a sandwich game, a homecoming game on the road. Yeah, but 11-2 against Illinois since '08. The problem is I don't know that Illinois had this caliber of a coaching staff or roster talent since then. That was one of the last best Illinois teams they've produced. Ohio State, they've lost 6 straight since they beat them in 2010. I don't see that being any different this year. Move Ohio State to 7 in a row. At Indiana, win. Northwestern, win. I think Nebraska's going to be fun, but they do get them at home. It's probably going to be cold. You're probably going to get some white stuff on the field. But the Badgers are 10-1 against the Huskers in Big Ten play. So again, they've got their number. I don't think these guys look at any of these records, but it's numbers are numbers. And Badgers are 5-0 in home, or 5-2 in their last few home finales. So that could, be a boost there. At Minnesota, a toss-up game, but I think it's a win. I actually had 6 wins and 5 question marks and a loss. They're ceiling at 11-1.
Floor?
If the season absolutely takes a turn for the worse, I do have the floor at 6-6. I think that they drew a tough schedule in certain aspects. Iowa, at Illinois, Ohio State, back to back. You could lose all 3 of those games. You can lose to Nebraska and at Minnesota, and you could even go into Washington State and lose early if you're not on your game. So ceiling 11-1, floor 6-6, but my prediction is 9-3. I agree with Drew and Corey so far. But Fickle's got immense talent and possibility this year with this team. I mean, you could have them 11-1 playing any of the big 3 on the East for the Big Ten championship in December, and that would be a blast.
Absolutely. I have one loss for them, and then 2 question marks. Those 2 question marks are the Iowa, Illinois, and the one loss would be Ohio State. I think they split Iowa and Illinois, and I think they're a 10-2 football club this year. I just don't think Matt Rule has enough talent at Nebraska yet at this time this season to overcome what Wisconsin has and what Luke Fickell does for his program. Because we've seen he can easily turn things around very quickly. The Minnesota game does bother me, but I feel like by that point in the season, Minnesota may be Already spirits a little depleted. Knowing that they're not going to be playing for the Big Ten championship may come, into play there. So they may want to try to spoil it. But I feel like Luke Fickell going into that game against Minnesota tells his team, one game and we get to go to Indy. You win one game and we get to go to Indy, right? And I think that's what it comes down to. And I think in that game, the will of Wisconsin wanting to get back to Indy. They've been there so many times and haven't raised that trophy. I think that pulls them over against Minnesota. So, I have them at 10-2. I mean, their floor for me is, I would have to say 6-6, like Ethan said, but I do think that they're just a 10-2 football team. And I think 10-2 is good enough to get them back to Indy anyways, I even think if they went 9-3, they would probably be back in Indy.
9-3 would make some interesting stories out of the West because that would probably bring Iowa, the Illinois into
It would
play.
be, well, yeah, but it would also, yeah, and you would have your tiebreaker scenarios.
Exactly, and that stretch again. I mean, that's a brutal stretch. Iowa, Illinois, Ohio State.
It is.
I mean, that's going to define your whole season.
Those 3 games, yeah, that's what I was saying. Like your heart of your schedule
Oh,
there.
yeah.
October is going to define what Wisconsin is all about this year. You're going to know what Wisconsin's about in October, in my opinion.
I agree.
It is nice that they draw the Ohio State game a week after Ohio State hosts Penn.
Yeah.
So Ohio State might be a little beat up.
Could be coming off a loss.
Or coming off a loss too, yeah.
I think that the Nebraska game late could be an issue, but I also have plenty of concerns with Nebraska's depth. And that late in the season, I don't know if they're going to have the depth to hang.
Oh, I don't either.
But that could be an interesting one as well.
I get it.
All right, guys. Thank you for your time here this Sunday morning. It was a pleasure as always.
Next week, the big one?
The next week is a show divided. Show divided next week.
Well, it's like 1, 1, and 2, but yeah, I get your point.
Show divided. Yeah. But so that will be next week where you get the 2 big boys, Ohio State and Michigan. We break them down, and anything exciting that happens that may come up here in the next week. God knows what the Big Ten coaches are up to.
Yeah, any coaching controversy to pop up.
Any controversies coming up. I got a special jersey for next week though. Got a new one. Got a new one. Nice. It's gonna be great. So
I gotta figure out what I'm gonna wear.
So we'll but so next week's a big week where we get Ohio State and Michigan, get their breakdowns of their seasons. Probably we all know it's 11-1, probably each of them, but we got to go through it, and we'll see what we have next week here for you guys. Anything else that you guys want to get off your chest here? A last word?
No, not a whole lot. I'm gonna watch some baseball today. I already watched the F1 race. Max, someone's got to slow him down, put a parachute on his car or something.
Also, if you guys have not seen it, last night, if you guys did not watch the UFC fight, please watch Gaethje's head kick against Poirier, and when he knocked him out in the second round. It was a beautiful setup with a punch straight into a head kick. It was beautiful. And Gaethje was crowned the new BMF.
Hell yeah.
So
I heard it was a good fight.
Oh, it was a phenomenal.
Until that happened.
Yeah, it was a great look. Dude, the first round was amazing. I was like, when I saw that happen, I was like, man, you could have waited to do that to the 5th round. Like, we could have got like 5 solid rounds out of you guys till one of you guys knocked each other out. But that's a beautiful part of the UFC. It's unpredictable. Guys, thank you for stopping out here today. Appreciate your time. Next week, Ohio State, Michigan, house divided, show divided. We'll see you then. Too sweet.
Deuces.